The giant crystal towers of Nexus Prime stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the biggest tower, thousands of alien beings filled the great Senate chamber. They came from every corner of the galaxy, creatures with scales, fur, tentacles, and forms that had no name. All of them waited for their king to speak. Galaxy King Vorthak sat on his throne made of black metal and glowing stones. He was huge even for his reptilian race. His dark green scales caught the light from above, and his yellow eyes looked down at the crowd below. 2 rows of sharp teeth showed when he smiled. This was not a kind smile. People of the galaxy, Vorthak's voice boomed through the chamber. Today marks a great victory for all civilized beings. The crowd went quiet. Even the smallest whisper stopped. Every eye turned to their king. On a distant moon called Haven 7, Taemin pressed his face closer to the old screen. The picture was fuzzy and the sound crackled, but he could see and hear everything. Around him, other refugees huddled in the cold metal room. Most were not human. Most had never seen a human before. But they all knew what humans were, the ones who said no to the Galaxy King. Taemin was 22 years old. 3 years ago, he had been a student on Earth, worrying about tests and girls and what to do with his life. Now he was the only human in a room full of aliens watching his species being erased from history. The human plague has been completely removed from our galaxy, King Vorthak continued. His words hit Taemin like physical blows. Their homeworld is nothing but dust and radiation. Their fleets are destroyed. Their colonies are empty. Not one human remains alive in any system under our control. The Senate erupted in cheers. Aliens jumped from their seats, waved their arms, tentacles, or whatever they had. Some made sounds that might have been applause. Others roared or clicked or buzzed with joy. They were celebrating the death of Taemin's entire species. Taemin's hands turned into fists. His nails cut into his palms, but he did not feel the pain. He wanted to scream, to run into that Senate chamber and show them that at least one human was still alive. But he stayed quiet and still. That was how he had survived this long. In another part of the galaxy, on a hidden asteroid base, Sora watched the same broadcast. She was older than Taemin, 35 years old, with short black hair and scars on her face from the last battle for Earth. She had been a commander in the Earth Defense Force. Now she was something else, something harder and more dangerous. Around her, 12 other humans sat in the dark room. They were all that remained of her unit. 13 people out of the billions who had lived on Earth. 13 people who were supposed to be dead. The former human territories will be divided among our loyal friends, King Vorthak announced. A huge map appeared behind him, showing the solar system that had once been humanity's home. Earth's moon will go to the Krillian Empire. Mars will belong to the Syndicate. The gas giants and their moons will be shared among smaller allies. Sora watched as her home was given away like pieces of meat to hungry animals. She did not cry. She had no tears left. Instead, she felt something cold and hard grow in her chest. It was not sadness. It was not even anger. It was something much worse. "Commander," whispered Jin Woo, the young engineer sitting next to her. He was barely 20, with nervous eyes and hands that always moved. "What do we do now?" Sora did not answer right away. She kept watching as the Galaxy King continued his speech. "Let this be a lesson to any who would dare resist our rule," Vorthak said. Humans thought they were special. They thought they could fight the natural order of the galaxy. They were wrong. They are extinct. They are forgotten. They are nothing. More cheers filled the Senate chamber. Some aliens started chanting Vorthak's name. Others sang songs in languages that sounded like breaking glass or grinding metal. On a trading station near the rim of known space, other small groups of humans watched in silence. They were scattered across dozens of worlds, hidden among alien populations, pretending to be something they were not. Most aliens could not tell humans apart from several other bipedal species, which made hiding easier. But every hidden human felt the same thing as they watched their extinction being celebrated. Taemin stood up slowly. The other refugees in the room looked at him with curious eyes. They knew he was different, but they did not know exactly what he was. He had told them he was from a small colony world that had been destroyed. It was not completely a lie. "Where are you going?" asked a blue-skinned female with large black eyes. Her name was unpronounceable, so everyone called her Blue. "I need some air," Taemin said quietly. He walked out of the room and into the narrow corridor outside. The moon's artificial gravity was weak, making each step feel light and strange. He found an empty observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, King Vorthak was dividing up his people's grave. Somewhere out there, aliens were dancing on the ashes of Earth. Somewhere out there, the galaxy thought humanity was dead and gone forever. Taemin smiled for the first time in months. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that would have made King Vorthak nervous if he could have seen it. Back on the asteroid base, Sora finally answered Jinwoo's question. "Now we become ghosts," she said softly. "Now we become the thing they fear in the dark. Now we show them what extinct really looks like." She turned to face her small team. In the dim light, their faces looked hard and determined. They had lost everything, their world, their families, their entire civilization. But they had not lost themselves. And that, Sora realized, might be the Galaxy King's biggest mistake. "Jinwoo, do you still have those military files you downloaded before Earth fell?" The young engineer nodded. "Everything. Ship designs, weapon specs, tactical manuals, even some things that were classified above my level." "Good. Dutyan, how are your infiltration skills?" A woman with cold eyes stepped forward. "I can get into any system they have. I can become anyone they need me to be." Sora looked around at her team, at the last soldiers of a dead world. "Then we have work to do. The Galaxy King just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. He told everyone we were extinct." She paused, and her smile was even colder than Taemin's had been. Time to prove him right. 6 months had passed since Galaxy King Vorthak told the universe that humans were extinct. 6 months since the celebration in the Senate chamber. 6 months since the last official record of humanity was erased from galactic databases, but something strange was happening in the dark. Spaces between stars, Captain Zexthor of the Hegemony, Cruiser Ironfang, stared at his navigation screen with growing confusion. His ship was supposed to meet a supply convoy at the Kepler station 3 hours ago. The convoy had 17 ships carrying food, weapons, and medical supplies for the Outer Rim territories. 17 ships with crews totaling over 2,000 beings. They were gone. "Sir," called his communications officer, a nervous creature with purple skin and too many eyes. "I'm getting nothing from the convoy. No distress signals, no emergency beacons, nothing." "Check again," Zexthor ordered. He was a professional soldier with 30 years of experience. Convoys did not just vanish in empty space. "Sir, I've checked 17 times. There's nothing there. It's like they never existed." Zexthor felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors from other captains. Strange stories about ships that went missing without a trace. Stories about ghost signals that appeared on scanners for just a moment before disappearing. Stories about crews who swore they saw impossible things in the darkness. Stories about humans who should not exist. On the hidden asteroid base, Sora studied the reports flowing in from their network of contacts. Each incident was small, careful, and perfectly planned. A supply convoy here, a patrol ship there, a communication relay in some forgotten system. Nothing big enough to draw major attention, but everything designed to create fear and confusion. "How many operations this month?" she asked Da-Un, who had become their coordinator of psychological warfare. 47 successful missions, Da-Un replied without looking up from her datapad. 0 casualties on our side. 0 survivors on theirs. Sora nodded with satisfaction. Diane had trained for this kind of work before Earth's destruction. She understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not a laser cannon or plasma bomb, but the fear that lived inside an enemy's mind. "What about the calling cards?" "Every site. Our people are following the protocol exactly." The calling cards were Jinwoo's idea. At every attack site, the human teams left behind small metal plates with symbols carved into them. The symbols looked ancient and mysterious to alien eyes, but they were actually quite simple. Old Earth languages and mathematical formulas that any human child would recognize. The aliens did not know this. To them, the symbols looked like some kind of magical or religious marking. Stories began to spread through the lower ranks of the hegemony forces. Stories about vengeful spirits that marked their victims before dragging them into the void. Taemin had joined one of the rescue teams operating near the Galactic Rim. His job was to find and free humans who had been captured during the invasion of Earth. The Galaxy King's forces had officially killed all humans, but secretly they had taken thousands as slaves and test subjects. Tonight, Taemin crouched in the ventilation system of a research station orbiting a dead planet. Through the metal grating, he could see into Laboratory 7, where 3 humans were strapped to examination tables. They were unconscious, with strange machines attached to their heads. The alien scientists were trying to understand how human brains worked. They wanted to know what made humans so good at fighting, so stubborn about refusing to surrender. They thought they could find the secret in blood samples and brain scans. Tae-min smiled coldly. They were looking in the wrong place. The secret was not in human biology. The secret was in human anger. He waited until the night shift came on duty. Only 2 guards and 1 scientist would be in the lab. Tae-min had studied their routines for 3 weeks. He knew exactly when they would be most vulnerable. At exactly 0300 station time, Tae-min dropped through the ceiling grate like a shadow. The first guard never saw him coming. The second guard had just enough time to reach for his weapon before Tae-min's knife found his throat. The scientist tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. "Please," the scientist begged in broken standard. "I was just following orders. I never hurt them." Tae-min looked at the human prisoners on the tables. One was a young woman, maybe 18 years old. Another was an old man with gray hair. The third was a child who could not be more than 12. "You're right," Tae-min said quietly. "You never hurt them." He left the scientist alive but paralyzed from the waist down. Before leaving, he placed one of the metal calling cards on the laboratory table. Let them try to figure out what the symbols meant. Let them wonder who had done this and how. Most importantly, let them fear. 3 systems away, Wu Jin was having a very different kind of meeting. He sat in a dark corner of a spaceport bar across from a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many arms. This was his contact in the Verdani resistance movement. "Your people fight well," the Verdani said in its whisper-thin voice. "Our intelligence networks report chaos in 17 sectors. The hegemony is pulling forces from occupation duties to hunt for ghosts." "Good," Wu Jin replied. "How are your own operations going?" "Better since we started using your tactics. The hit-and-run methods, the psychological warfare, the way you make them afraid of empty space. It's working," Wu Jin nodded. "This was part of Sora's larger plan. Humans were sharing their knowledge with other resistance groups across the galaxy. Not just weapon designs and battle tactics, but something more important. The understanding that even the strongest enemy could be beaten if you were smart enough and patient enough." "There's something else," the Verdani continued. "We've been hearing stories from hegemony deserters. Stories about human ghosts that come in the night. Some of them are refusing to serve in deep space assignments. They think your extinct people are hunting them." "What do you think?" Wu Jin asked. The tree creature's many eyes blinked in sequence. "I think the dead make the best soldiers. They have nothing left to lose." Back on Captain Zexthor's cruiser, the bridge crew was getting nervous. They had found the remains of the supply convoy scattered across 3 light-years of space. Some ships had been completely vaporized. Others looked like they had been taken apart piece by piece with surgical precision. "Sir," the communications officer called out. "I'm picking up a signal." "From who?" "Unknown. It's very faint, but it's definitely artificial." Zexthor studied his scanner display. The signal was coming from an area of space that should have been completely empty. "Put it on speakers." Static filled the bridge for several seconds. Then through the noise came a sound that made every alien on the bridge freeze with terror. It was singing. A human voice singing an old Earth song about going home. The voice was clear and beautiful and impossible because all humans were dead. "Cut the signal," Zexthor ordered. "Sir, I can't. It's not coming through our communications array. It's just there." The singing continued for exactly 60 seconds, then stopped. In the silence that followed, every being on the bridge looked at their captain with wide, frightened eyes. Zexthor had served the Galaxy King for 30 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds and destroyed hundreds of enemy ships. He was not afraid of anything that lived in the universe, but dead things singing in empty space, that was different. That was something new and terrible. "Set course for the nearest hegemony base," he ordered. "Maximum speed." As the Iron Fang turned away from the area, its crew did not see the small human ship that had been watching them from behind a nearby asteroid. They did not see Unji, the tech specialist who had hacked into their communication system and played the recording at exactly the right moment. They did not see her smile as she marked another successful psychological operation in her logbook. The ghosts were learning to hunt, and their prey was starting to understand what it meant to be afraid. 1 year after Galaxy King Vorthak declared humanity extinct, his empire was beginning to crack. It started small. A few reports of missing patrols in the Outer Rim territories, some strange equipment failures on military bases. Occasionally, a supply officer would report that weapons or medical supplies had vanished from secure storage areas. Normal commanders would blame these incidents on incompetence or corruption, but the reports kept coming, and they were getting stranger. Admiral Korthek sat in his command center on the fortress world of Grimhold, staring at a data screen that made no sense. In the past month, his sector had lost 47 patrol ships, 18 supply convoys, and 3 entire military outposts. Not to enemy fleets or rebellion forces, but to nothing at all. Admiral, his aide called nervously, we have another report from the Zarian system. Korthek's 4 eyes turned toward the young officer. What now? The mining station on Zarian 4 has gone dark. Complete communication blackout. Their last transmission was... The aide paused and swallowed hard. Their last transmission was someone screaming about humans in the ventilation shafts. Humans are extinct, Korthek said automatically. But his voice lacked conviction. He had been saying those words for months now, and they were starting to sound hollow even to himself. Yes, sir. But the security recordings before the blackout show something. The technicians think it might be equipment malfunction. But show me. The screen flickered to life, displaying grainy security footage from the mining station. At first, everything looked normal. Alien workers moved through the corridors carrying tools and data pads. Then for just a moment, a shadow moved through the background. It was bipedal, roughly the right size to be human, but the image was too unclear to be certain. 3 seconds later, the feed cut to static. How many workers were on that station? Korthek asked. 432, sir. Send a recovery team. Full military escort. 2 days later, the recovery team found the mining station intact but completely empty. Every worker had vanished without a trace. The only thing left behind was a small metal plate with strange symbols carved into it. Placed carefully on the station commander's desk, 3 systems away, Hyunwoo crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath a hegemony communications hub. He was a former Special Forces operative who had specialized in deep strike missions behind enemy lines. Now he was putting those skills to use in ways he had never imagined during his military training. Mi-young, are you getting the data transfer? He whispered into his throat microphone. Confirmed, came the reply in his earpiece. I'm downloading their entire communications database. This is incredible stuff, Hyunwoo. Fleet movements, supply schedules, personnel records. It's like having a window into their entire operation. Mi-young was their intelligence analyst, a former data specialist who had worked for Earth's diplomatic corps. She had an amazing ability to find patterns in seemingly random information. Since joining Sora's resistance network, she had become their eyes and ears across the galaxy. How much longer? Hyunwoo asked. 2 more minutes. Their security systems are more sophisticated than I expected, but they're not designed to stop someone who's supposed to be extinct. Hyunwoo smiled grimly. That was becoming their greatest advantage. The hegemony security was designed to stop known threats. Rebellious alien species, rogue military units, criminal organizations. They had no protocols for dealing with an enemy that officially did not exist. While Mi-young worked, Hyunwoo thought about the mission that had brought him here. Sora's network had intercepted communications suggesting that this hub was coordinating the search for human survivors. The Galaxy King was starting to suspect that some humans might have escaped Earth's destruction, and he was quietly organizing hunting parties to find and eliminate them. The irony was delicious. Korthek was looking for scattered refugees hiding in fear, not realizing that those refugees had already organized into the most effective resistance movement in galactic history. Transfer complete, Mi-young announced. Get out of there. Hyunwoo began his carefully planned withdrawal from the facility. Before leaving, he placed one of their calling cards in the main computer core, where it would be found during the next maintenance cycle. Then he used a small explosive charge to create a minor system failure that would cover his tracks while making the security staff nervous about equipment reliability. On the other side of the galaxy, Dong-hyun was completing a very different kind of mission. As their weapons specialist, he had been tasked with acquiring new technology that could give their small forces an edge against the massive hegemony military. The research facility on Kappa Station was developing experimental shield generators that could make small ships nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Dong-hyun had spent 3 weeks infiltrating the facility as a maintenance worker, slowly learning the layout and security procedures. Tonight he would steal not just the shields, but the entire research database that contained the plans for building them. Patience, he reminded himself as he moved through the darkened laboratory corridors. Slow and careful wins the war. Dong-hyun had learned patience during the Siege of Earth when he had spent 6 months building improvised weapons in hidden bunkers while the planet burned around him. He had watched billions of his people die, but he had also learned that sometimes the smallest actions could have the biggest consequences. The shield generator prototypes were kept in a high-security vault that required 3 different authorization codes. Dong-hyun had obtained all 3 codes over the past week by carefully observing the senior researchers. He entered them in sequence and waited for the vault door to slide open. Inside, 5 prototype shield generators sat on testing platforms, each one smaller than his fist but containing technology that could change the balance of power in space combat. Dong-hyun carefully removed all 5 units and replaced them with identical-looking decoys that would fool casual inspection. But the real prize was the research computer that contained years of development work. Dong-hyun connected a data extractor to the terminal and began downloading terabytes of technical specifications, test results, and theoretical studies. While the download progressed, he thought about his daughter. She had been 8 years old when Earth fell, with bright eyes and a laugh that could make him smile even after the worst days of fighting. He did not know if she had survived the orbital bombardment, but he liked to imagine that she was out there somewhere, growing up among the scattered human refugees. If she was alive, she would inherit a galaxy where humans were no longer victims. Dong-hyun would make sure of that. The download finished just as the facility's night shift began their security rounds. Dong-hyun slipped out through the same maintenance shaft he had used to enter, leaving behind another calling card and a small virus that would corrupt the backup systems over the next several weeks. Back at their hidden base, Sora reviewed the intelligence reports flowing in from operations across the galaxy. The pattern was becoming clear. Hegemony forces were pulling back from routine patrols and consolidating around major installations. Commanders were requesting additional security personnel for missions that should have been routine. Most tellingly, recruitment for deep space assignments was down by 30% as word spread about the mysterious disappearances. "They're starting to crack," Tae-yoon observed as she studied the psychological profiles of captured enemy personnel. Fear is a powerful weapon, but it's also unpredictable. Push too hard and they might snap in unexpected ways. "What do you recommend?" Sora asked. "We escalate, but carefully. Start hitting larger targets, but make sure we leave more survivors to spread the stories. A dead enemy can't be afraid, but a terrified enemy can demoralize an entire fleet." Sora nodded. They had spent a year building their reputation as ghosts and legends. Now it was time to become something more concrete but equally terrifying. "What about the other resistance movements?" she asked Wu Jin, growing bolder every week. "The Verdani have liberated 6 worlds using tactics we taught them. The Crystalline Coalition has started their own ghost operations in the core systems. Even some of the hegemony's former allies are beginning to question their loyalty. Good. The more chaos we create, the harder it becomes for Vorthak to maintain control." Sora looked around at her team, at the humans who had been declared extinct but refused to die. They were no longer the desperate survivors who had escaped Earth's destruction. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They had become legends made flesh, and legends were much harder to kill than ordinary people. In his palace on Nexus Prime, Galaxy King Vorthak stared at reports that filled him with growing unease. His advisors spoke carefully about equipment failures and coordination problems, but he could read between the lines. Something was out there in the dark spaces between stars, something that was systematically dismantling his empire one piece at a time. He refused to believe it could be humans. Humans were extinct. He had made sure of that personally. But late at night, alone in his chambers, Vorthak sometimes found himself looking up at the stars and wondering what shadows might be moving in the darkness between them. 2 years after Galaxy King Vorthak proclaimed humanity extinct, his empire was falling apart. The signs were everywhere for those who knew how to look. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries were now considered too dangerous for civilian traffic. Military bases that had once been staffed by skeleton crews now required full battalions just to maintain basic security. Entire sectors of space had been quietly abandoned by hegemony forces, officially due to resource reallocation, but actually because too many ships had vanished in those regions. On Nexus Prime, in the deepest levels of the palace complex, Galaxy King Vorthak met with his inner circle of advisors. The chamber was heavily shielded against electronic surveillance, and the guards outside had been ordered to remain out of hearing range. This was not a conversation that could risk being overheard. "Give me the real numbers," Vorthak demanded. General Thrakus, his military commander, consulted a datapad with shaking claws. "In the past year, we have lost 3,000 ships of various classes. 47 major installations have been destroyed or abandoned. Recruitment is down 60% across all military branches. And the other resistance movements? Growing stronger every month. 18 species that were previously pacified have begun active rebellion. They're using tactics and weapons that suggest coordination with an outside force." Vorthak's massive head turned toward his intelligence chief. "Who is coordinating them?" The intelligence chief, a nervous creature with too many eyes, avoided looking directly at his king. The evidence suggests it might be human survivors, Your Majesty." The chamber fell silent. Even the air recycling systems seemed to quiet down, as if the machinery itself was afraid to make noise. "Humans are extinct," Vorthak said slowly. "I personally oversaw the destruction of their homeworld. I watched their fleets burn. Every human colony was eliminated." "Yes, Your Majesty, but some might have escaped. Small groups, scattered individuals. If they organized, they would be refugees trying to hide, not ghosts destroying my empire." Vorthak's roar echoed off the chamber walls. "Find me proof. Real evidence. Not ghost stories and equipment failures." But even as he spoke, Vorthak felt a cold certainty growing in his chest. Deep down he knew the truth. The humans had survived, and they were coming for him. On a small moon orbiting a gas giant in the outer rim, Seokjin addressed a gathering unlike any in galactic history. Representatives from 12 different species sat in a circle around him, their attention focused completely on his words. Some had traveled for weeks to attend this meeting. Others had risked their lives just to learn its location. "We stand at a crossroads," Seokjin said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "For too long, the galaxy has been ruled by fear. Fear of the hegemony's fleets, fear of their weapons, fear of what they would do to anyone who dared resist." He paused, letting his words sink in. Seokjin had once been a diplomat for Earth's government, skilled at reading audiences and knowing exactly what they needed to hear. Those skills served him well now. But fear is a two-way weapon, and we have learned to use it better than they ever imagined. A representative from the Verdani resistance spoke up. "Your people have done the impossible. You've turned extinction into invisibility, death into strength. But how long can you maintain this war of shadows?" "As long as necessary," Seokjin replied. "But shadows are not our only weapon. We've been building something larger. Something that will end the hegemony once and for all." He gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the circle. It showed a detailed map of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light marking resistance cells, hidden bases, and allied forces. Every dot you see represents a group that has been trained by human survivors. Every light is a cell that has learned our tactics, our strategies, our way of fighting. The hegemony thinks they're dealing with random terrorist attacks. They don't understand that they're facing a coordinated rebellion spanning half the galaxy. The representatives leaned forward, studying the display with growing amazement. The network was vast, far larger than any of them had imagined. "What do you need from us?" asked a crystalline being whose species had been enslaved by the hegemony for 3 centuries. "Patience, coordination, and when the time comes, the courage to strike at the heart of their power." Meanwhile, in a hidden facility buried deep inside an asteroid, Yejin worked on the most complex strategic planning operation in human history. She was a former Earth Fleet admiral who had specialized in large-scale tactical coordination. Now she was applying those skills to something much bigger than any military operation Earth had ever attempted. "Jinwoo, what's the status on the new ship designs?" she asked without looking up from her planning screens. The young engineer consulted his datapad. "Prototype testing is complete. The new stealth fighters are 40% faster than anything the hegemony has, and they're completely invisible to their sensor nets. We can build them using materials and technology we've acquired over the past year. How many can we produce? With our current manufacturing capacity, maybe 50 per month. But if we bring the other resistance groups into the production network, do it. I want 300 ships ready within 6 months. Yejin turned to another screen showing personnel reports from across their network. The numbers were staggering. What had started as a few dozen survivors had grown into an organization with thousands of active operatives and tens of thousands of support personnel drawn from dozens of species. Jae-hyun, how are our people holding up? The former Earthfleet admiral looked up from his own planning station. Morale is high. Everyone understands what we're building toward. But they're getting impatient. 2 years of shadow warfare is wearing on some of the younger operatives. They'll have their chance soon enough, Yejin said grimly. What about the infiltration of Nexus Prime? Taemin's team has been in position for 3 months. They've mapped every security system, identified every guard rotation, and established contact with sympathetic elements among the support staff. When you give the word, they can get us inside the palace complex. Yejin nodded. The plan taking shape in her mind was audacious beyond belief. But she had learned that sometimes the most impossible ideas were also the most effective. Taemin himself was currently working as a maintenance technician in the lower levels of the Galaxy King's palace. It had taken 6 months of careful planning to get him into position, but now he moved through the corridors with complete freedom. To the guards and officials who passed him, he was just another alien worker keeping the ancient systems running. But Taemin was mapping every corridor, every security checkpoint, every escape route. He was learning the palace's rhythms and routines. Most importantly, he was identifying the perfect moment to strike. The annual Senate Assembly is in 4 months, he reported during his weekly communication with the resistance leadership. Every major political figure in the galaxy will be there. If we're going to make a statement, that's our best opportunity. Sora's voice came back through the encrypted channel. Are you certain you can get us inside? I'm certain. But once we're in, there's no going back. This won't be a hit-and-run operation. It's all or nothing. Then we'd better make sure it's all. As Taemin ended the communication, he allowed himself a moment to think about how much had changed since that day 2 years ago, when he watched humanity being declared extinct. He had been a frightened refugee then, hiding among aliens and trying to forget what he had lost. Now he was something else entirely. He was the advanced scout for humanity's return to the galactic stage. He was the ghost who would open the door for his people to step out of the shadows and into the light. But first, he had to survive 4 more months of pretending to be dead while living in the heart of his enemy's stronghold. In her command center, Sora reviewed the final elements of their plan. Everything they had built over the past 2 years was leading to this moment. The psychological warfare, the military strikes, the alliance building, the technology theft, all of it had been preparation for one decisive action. Daun, are you ready for the largest psychological operation in galactic history? Ready and waiting, Daun replied with a cold smile. When we're done, every being in the galaxy will know that humanity never died. We just learned to hunt. Sora looked around at her team, at the humans who had refused to accept extinction and had instead chosen to become legend. They were no longer Earth's children. They were something new, something forged in the fires of loss and tempered by 2 years of impossible warfare. They were the reckoning that Galaxy King Vorthak had brought upon himself when he tried to erase humanity from existence. And in 4 months, they would remind him why humans had never learned to surrender. 3 years to the day after Galaxy King Vorthak proclaimed humanity extinct, the Galactic Senate gathered once again in the crystal towers of Nexus Prime. The great chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the vast amphitheater, but the conversations were different this time. Instead of celebrating their king's victories, they whispered about the growing chaos in the outer territories. Ships vanishing in empty space, entire colonies going dark without explanation, resistance movements growing bolder with each passing month. Galaxy King Vorthak sat on his throne of black metal and glowing stones, his massive reptilian form radiating power and authority. But those who knew him well could see the tension in his posture, the way his yellow eyes constantly scanned the crowd as if looking for threats that might not exist. People of the galaxy, Vorthak's voice boomed across the chamber. We gathered today to celebrate another year of peace and prosperity under hegemony rule. The word sounded hollow even to his own ears. Peace was the last thing the galaxy had known in recent months. In the maintenance tunnels far beneath the Senate chamber, Taemin checked his chronometer. Exactly 15 minutes until the security shift change. He had been working in the palace for 4 months now, learning every secret passage and hidden entrance. Today, all that knowledge would finally be put to use. "All teams report," he whispered into his throat communicator. "Team 2 in position," came Hyunwoo's voice. He was stationed near the main power distribution center. "Team 3 ready," reported Dong-hyun from his position in the communications hub. "Team 4 standing by," said Yoonji, who had infiltrated the central computer core. And in the shadows outside the palace, Sora waited with the final element of their plan. She wore the scarred and battered armor of an Earth Defense Force commander, the same uniform she had worn during the last battle for Earth 3 years ago. It was a symbol, a reminder of what the hegemony had tried to destroy. "Commence Operation Baba Yaga," she said quietly. Taemin moved through the tunnels with practiced ease, his footsteps silent on the metal floors. He reached the access panel he had identified weeks ago, a maintenance hatch that led directly into the Senate chamber's lower level. The security sensors had been disabled months ago with subtle modifications that looked like routine equipment upgrades. He emerged into a storage area filled with cleaning supplies and spare furniture. Through the walls he could hear the galaxy, King's voice echoing through the chamber as he spoke about territorial expansion and the elimination of rebel forces. "The former human territories have proven extremely valuable to our loyal allies," Vorthak was saying. "Their technology, properly adapted, has strengthened our fleets. Their former colonies now serve as productive worlds under proper management." Taemin smiled grimly as he made his way toward the chamber's main entrance. Soon, Vorthak would learn just how wrong he had been about human extinction. In the power distribution center, Hyunwoo waited for his signal. The charges he had placed over the past week were designed not to destroy the palace's power grid, but to create a very specific pattern of failures. Lights would flicker in sequence. Emergency systems would activate and deactivate, and most importantly, the security barriers around the Senate chamber would fail at exactly the right moment. "Power sequence initiating," he reported. Throughout the palace, lights began to dim and flicker. Emergency lighting activated in some corridors while others went completely dark. To the guards, it looked like a system malfunction, the kind of thing that happened occasionally in a building as old and complex as the royal palace. In the communications hub, Dong-hyun was implementing the most audacious part of their plan. Using access codes he had stolen over months of careful observation, he began broadcasting a signal that would reach every communication device in the palace complex. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," he reported. The signal was not random noise or jamming static. It was a human voice singing an old Earth song about homecoming, the same song that had terrified Captain Zexthor and his crew 2 years ago, but now amplified and transmitted to thousands of receivers simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the palace, guards and officials heard the impossible sound of human voices singing in perfect harmony. The dead were not supposed to sing. The extinct were not supposed to have voices. In the Senate chamber, the representatives began to murmur nervously as the song echoed from hidden speakers. Galaxy King Vorthak's speech faltered as he heard the voices of the people he had personally eliminated. "Technical difficulties," he announced, trying to maintain control. "Continue with the proceedings." But the singing did not stop. It grew louder, more complex, as if an entire choir of ghosts was surrounding the chamber. Some representatives began to fidget in their seats. Others looked toward the exits, calculating how quickly they could leave. Yoonji, monitoring everything from the computer core, began the next phase. Security cameras throughout the palace flickered to life, but instead of showing normal surveillance footage, they displayed images that should not exist. Human faces staring directly into the cameras, human soldiers standing in corridors that should have been empty, human children laughing in rooms that had been sealed for years. The images lasted only seconds before flickering back to normal views, but they were enough to send waves of panic through the security forces. Guards began reporting ghost sightings over their communicators, their voices tight with fear. In his command post, the palace security chief stared at his monitor displays with growing horror. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The feeds are clean. There's nothing there." But his guards were seeing humans everywhere, in the corridors, in the ventilation shafts, standing in groups in rooms that sensors indicated were empty. The extinct were walking through his palace as if they owned it. Galaxy King Vorthak tried to continue his speech. but the chaos was spreading through the chamber. Representatives were standing up, looking around nervously, talking among themselves in urgent whispers. The carefully orchestrated celebration was falling apart. "Security," Vorthak commanded. "Restore order immediately." But his security forces were dealing with reports of impossible intruders throughout the palace. Every guard unit was chasing ghosts, responding to sightings that vanished the moment they arrived. The entire security apparatus was paralyzed by fear and confusion. That was when the main doors to the Senate chamber exploded inward. The blast was precisely calculated, powerful enough to destroy the massive portal, but controlled enough to avoid harming anyone in the chamber. Smoke and debris filled the air as alarms began to wail throughout the palace. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure walked calmly into the chamber. Sora stepped through the shattered doorway wearing her Earth Defense Force armor. Behind her, more figures emerged from the smoke, human soldiers in combat gear, moving with the disciplined precision of elite troops. They spread out along the walls of the chamber, weapons ready but not yet aimed at specific targets. The Senate chamber fell completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the impossible sight of human beings walking freely in the heart of the hegemony's power. Sora removed her helmet, revealing her scarred face and determined eyes. Her black hair was streaked with gray now, aged by 3 years of impossible warfare. But her voice was strong and clear as it carried across the silent chamber. "You declared us extinct," she said simply. "You were wrong." Galaxy King Vorthak stared at her with a mixture of disbelief and growing rage. "Impossible. You are dead. All of you. I watched your world burn. You watched our world die." Sora agreed. "But you did not kill our spirit. You did not destroy our will. You freed us from the burden of playing by civilized rules." She gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. Resistance movements on dozens of worlds, human-trained forces attacking hegemony installations, entire fleets in open rebellion against the king's authority. "You called us a plague," Sora continued. "You were right about that too. We spread, we adapted, we infected your empire with something you had never encountered before." "What?" Vorthak demanded. "Hope." The displays showed more images now, former slaves breaking their chains, conquered species rising up against their oppressors, hegemony forces surrendering rather than face the mysterious human ghosts that haunted their nightmares. Siak Jin stepped forward from among the human soldiers. "People of the galaxy," he called out, his diplomatic training evident in his commanding presence. "You have a choice to make today." He turned to address the assembled representatives directly. "You can continue to serve a king who lies to you about basic facts. King whose empire is crumbling because he cannot face the truth." More humans emerged from hidden positions throughout the chamber. They had been disguised as maintenance workers, guards, even as some of the alien representatives themselves. For months they had been infiltrating every level of the palace, learning its secrets, preparing for this moment. Tamian appeared near the Galaxy King's throne, having climbed up through hidden passages in the chamber walls. He was no longer the frightened refugee who had watched humanity's funeral 3 years ago. He was a soldier, a ghost made flesh, living proof that